The day I walked into my brother's engagement party wearing my hospital badge, I didn't think it would matter. It was clipped to my coat, the way it always was after a long shift. I'd come straight from the hospital. 31 hours. I hadn't even changed. My mother texted me twice that morning. Don't be late. This is important for the family. What she meant was, this is important for your brother. What she always meant. I drove 40 minutes across town with coffee going cold in the cup holder and a gift bag balanced on the passenger seat. I told myself I was just tired, that the tightness in my chest was exhaustion, not something older and harder to name. I was wrong about that. My brother's name is Wesley. He's 2 years younger than me, and my parents have always spoken about him the way people speak about a rare thing they were lucky to find. When he got into business school, my father took the whole family out to Ruth's Chris. When I matched into my residency program, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is one of the hardest processes in medicine, where you're ranked against thousands of other applicants, my mother said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then asked me if I was still seeing that guy from Ohio. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 2 years. But that's a different story. Wesley is charming in the way that some men are, the kind of charming that fills a room without trying. He tells a story and people lean in. He makes a toast and women tear up. He is genuinely good at making people feel like the most important person in the room, which is a gift, truly. I've always known that about him. I've also always known that our parents gave that gift a lot of help. His fiancée's name is Amber. I'd met her twice before the engagement party. Once at Thanksgiving, once at a 4th of July cookout at my aunt's house. She was beautiful and polished, and seemed to genuinely love my brother, which is all I ever wanted for him. She had the kind of smile that reached her eyes. I liked her, or I was starting to. The party was at a hotel ballroom downtown. The kind with high ceilings and little lights strung in curtains and past appetizers that nobody actually eats. My parents had paid for most of it. My father had mentioned the cost exactly 3 times in the month leading up to it, which, for him, meant it was significant. I pulled into the valet lane and handed over my keys. The young man who took them couldn't have been more badge and said, "Have a good evening, doctor." A small thing, just politeness. But I noticed it the way you notice warmth when you've been outside in the cold for a while. Inside, the room was already full. String quartet in the corner. White linens. People I half recognized from Christmas cards and old holidays, dressed in the kind of clothes that signal occasion. I saw my mother first, her hair done the way she does it for weddings and funerals, and she was talking to Amber's mother when I came in. She looked up, saw me, and her expression did a small complicated thing. Not unhappy exactly, more like a recalibration. She excused herself and came over. "You came straight from work," she said. Not a question. "I did," I said. "I had a patient in surgery this morning. I got here as fast as I could." She glanced at my badge, then at my coat, then back at my face. "You could have changed in the car." "I didn't bring a change of clothes, Mom. I told you this was formal. I'd driven 40 minutes after 31 hours on my feet, and I'd made it here, to this room for my brother, and the first thing she said was about my clothes." I took a slow breath. I knew this rhythm. I'd been dancing it my whole life. "I'll find Wesley," I said. "I should tell you something about my family and about me, and about why that night mattered the way it did. I grew up in a house where achievement was currency, but the exchange rate was not applied equally. My brother's wins were announced. Mine were acknowledged and filed away. He got the party, the toast, the "can you believe this kid?" from our father. I got a nod and a pivot to something else. I used to think I was imagining it. I spent years thinking that. I became a doctor because I wanted to. Because I was 14 years old and sat with my grandmother in a hospital room and watched what the doctors did and thought, I want to do that. Because something in me responded to the particular weight of being the person someone trusts with their life. I didn't do it to prove anything to anyone. But I'd be lying if I said the approval never mattered. It always mattered. I just got better at pretending it didn't. 8 years of training, medical school, residency, fellowship. I'm a cardiac surgeon now. I operate on people's hearts. Literally. I open their chests and I fix what's broken, and I close them back up, and sometimes they live because of what I did, and sometimes they don't, and I carry both of those with me every day. My father knows I'm a doctor. He says it to people at church sometimes. My daughter's in medicine. In the way that men of his generation reference their children's careers, as a fact, a statistic, something on a list. He has never asked me what it's like. He has never asked me about a patient, or a hard case, or what it feels like to hold a human heart in my hands. He asks Wesley about his quarterly projections. He asks Wesley about his accounts, his clients, his golf handicap. He and Wesley can talk for 45 minutes about the Chicago Bears, and I have stood in rooms watching them and felt like I was behind glass. I'm not angry about it, or I've made peace with not being angry about it. That's not the same thing, I know. My brother found me at the bar, which is where I went after the conversation with my mother. He hugged me hard and he looked genuinely happy I was there, and I believed it. Because Wesley has always loved me even when he didn't see what our parents were doing. Some people are good without being perceptive. He's one of them. You look exhausted, he said. I had a long surgery, I said. Tell me about Amber. He lit up the way people do when they're really in love. Not just happy lit, but lit from somewhere below, something that changes the quality of the light coming off a person. He talked about her for 10 minutes straight, and I listened to every word, and I meant it when I said she sounded wonderful. Then, our father appeared. He was wearing a suit, the good one, navy with a faint stripe. He was holding a glass of something amber-colored, and he had the look he gets at family events. Expansive, proprietary, the look of a man who is exactly where he expects to be. There she is, he said, and he said it the way you'd say it about anyone, about a neighbor's kid or a distant cousin. Not the way you'd say it about someone you were proud of. Hi, Dad. He looked at my badge. The look was brief, but I caught it, the fractional drop at the corner of his mouth, the way his eyes moved away from it quickly, like he wanted to unsee it. You came from the hospital, he said. I had a surgery. On a Saturday. Hearts don't schedule around weekends, I said. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Then he looked at Wesley, and his whole face rearranged. This guy, he said, and clapped my brother on the shoulder. This is the night, huh? You nervous? And Wesley laughed, and my father laughed, and I stood there holding my drink, and I thought about the drive over. About the cold, about the valet, who had said, have a good evening, doctor, and the smallness of how much that had meant. The dinner portion started about an hour in. We were seated at a round table near the front. Family table, the one closest to the little raised platform where speeches would happen. Amber's family was there too. Her parents, a younger sister who reminded me a little of myself at that age, quiet in a room full of noise. Amber's father was a man named Douglas. I'd met him briefly before, at that 4th of July cookout. He was a retired federal judge. Calm, deliberate, the kind of man who listens before he speaks. I'd liked him immediately, the way you sometimes like people before you can explain why. He sat across from me at the table, and we talked for a while about the hospital, about cardiology, about the way the healthcare system was shifting. He asked real questions. He listened to the answers. He said that must be both exhausting and extraordinary. And I thought, yes, that is exactly what it is. At some point, my father, who was 2 seats down and half present in our conversation, said something that I almost didn't catch. Amber's family had mentioned a friend of theirs, a doctor, a radiologist, had just been named department chief somewhere out west. Big deal, impressive, the family was thrilled about it, and my father said, doctors who make it to the top, they've got something extra. That drive, that ambition. Not everyone has it. He was looking at Douglas when he said it, nodding in that way he has, the I know how the world works nod. I waited for him to look at me. He didn't look at me. I sat there with a forkful of something I'd stopped tasting, and I thought about what it means to be invisible to someone who is required, by blood, to see you. After dinner came the speeches. Wesley's best friend went first. Funny, warm, a little roastish in the way best friend speeches usually are. Amber's sister went second and made everyone cry. Then Douglas stood up. He was the kind of speaker who didn't need notes. He talked about Amber, about watching her grow up, about the moment he knew she had found her person. He was funny and serious in equal measure, and I watched my father nodding along, impressed, and I recognized on his face the particular expression of a man who respects another man the way he respects no one else. Then Douglas paused. He said he wanted to say something about the people at the table, about the family Wesley was marrying into and the family Amber was joining. He looked around, and then he looked at me. I have to say, he said, I did my homework on this family. And when I found out that my future son-in-law's sister was Dr. Noel Whitfield, the cardiac surgeon over at Northwestern Memorial, I'll be honest, I called a colleague. He smiled. Because I have one of the finest interventional cardiologists I know, Dr. Patricia Huang, and I said, Patricia, do you know a Whitfield in cardiac surgery? And she said, Douglas, she's one of the best we have. I trained with her attending. She's the real thing. The room had gone quiet in that particular way rooms do. So to Wesley, Douglas said, raising his glass, congratulations on finding Amber, and to your sister, thank you for the work you do. People are alive because of you. That matters. I don't know what my face was doing. I hope it was composed. I felt something move through me. Not triumph, not vindication exactly, but something that was made of those things and older things, and something I hadn't let myself feel in a very long time. I looked at my father. He was very still. He was holding us and he was looking at Douglas, and then slowly, like a man turning towards something he wasn't ready to see, he looked at me. I want to tell you what happened in that look, because I've thought about it many times since. It wasn't shame, exactly. Or if it was the kind of shame that comes not from what you've done, but from what you've finally seen, the gap between what you believed and what was true. I watched something cross my father's face that I had never seen there before when he was looking at me. Something like reckoning. He didn't say anything. Not there, not in the middle of Douglas's toast. People were applauding, and Wesley was squeezing Amber's hand, and my mother was pressing her fingers to her eyes, and my father sat there holding his glass, and he did not applaud for a long moment, and then he did. I didn't need him to say anything. That's the thing I realized, sitting in that room with little lights and string music and the smell of centerpiece flowers that were too fragrant. I had spent so many years angled toward him, waiting for something to shift, waiting for him to see me the way Douglas, a stranger, a man I'd met twice, had taken the time to see me. I had measured my worth in his attention the way you measure water in a cup you're always trying to fill. I was tired of filling it. Amber found me near the end of the evening, out on the terrace where people had started to filter out for air. She hugged me without preamble, the way warm people do, and she said, "My dad doesn't compliment people easily. Just so you know." I told her I knew. She said, "He asked me about you on the way here." I didn't know half of what he told me about you. She paused. I thought about that for a moment. Some people, I said, don't ask. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. Maybe she did. She was going to be family now. Maybe she'd already figured out some of the architecture of this particular house. She squeezed my hand and went back inside, and I stood there for a minute in the October air, watching the city lights. My mother came out a few minutes later. She stood beside me and didn't say anything for a while. She had her arms crossed over the coral dress and she was looking out at the same lights. "I didn't know Patricia Huang knew who you were," she finally said. "There are a lot of things I don't tell you guys," I said. "Not mean, just true." She was quiet. "Our father was proud," she said. "He was just—" I didn't know how to. "I know," I said again, gently. Because I did know. And knowing didn't fix it, but it made it easier to set down. "I know." She put her arm through mine, the way she used to do when I was small. I let her. My father found me before I left. The party was winding down, the string quartet packing up, the last of the past desserts making the rounds. He came up beside me near the coat check, and we stood for a moment not talking, which is something we're both practiced at. Then he said, "Douglas thinks a lot of you." I gathered that, I said. Another pause. "I should have asked," he said. "About the work, what you do." I looked at him. He was looking at the floor, then he looked up, and I saw that the thing that had crossed his face during the toast was still there, quieter now but present. "You can still ask," I said. He nodded, slowly, the way men of his generation do when they're agreeing to something that costs them. We didn't hug. That's not how we are. But he held open the door when we walked out, and that, from him, was something. Driving home, I thought about the things that go unseen for years, not because they're hidden, but because the people who should be looking have turned their gaze somewhere else. My father loved me. I've never doubted that in a clean, factual way. But love and seeing are different things, and he had loved me without seeing me for most of my life, and I had let that be the shape of things because I didn't know how to insist on more. Douglas, a man I'd met twice, had made one phone call, had asked one question, and from that one question a room full of people said something about me that my own father hadn't known. That's not a dramatic tragedy. It's just a quiet one. The kind that lives in small moments. A dinner where you're not asked, a toast where you're not mentioned, a conversation about ambition where you're sitting at the table and still somehow not there. I didn't want my father to feel small. That's the truth. Even after everything, I didn't want that for him. I wanted him to see me. Those two things coexisted for a long time without resolution. But somewhere in the drive home, I can't tell you exactly where, some stretch of the expressway with light rain starting and the windshield wipers going, I let go of one of them. Not of him, not of wanting the relationship to grow into something better, but of the particular ache that came from needing him to see me in order to feel seen. Douglas had seen me, my patients see me, the residents I trained see me, the colleague who told Douglas I was the real thing. She saw me. I had never been invisible. I had only ever been invisible to one person, and I had mistaken that one person's blindness for the whole room. 3 weeks later, my father called me on a Tuesday evening. I was at home, still in scrubs, eating leftover pasta over the sink, and cooking feels ambitious. When his name appeared on my phone, I almost didn't pick up. Not out of anger, just surprise. He doesn't call. We're a texting family, brief and functional, I answered. He said, I was watching something on the TV about cardiac surgery, valve replacements. I didn't understand most of it. A pause. Is that what you do? I set down the fork. Some depends on the patient. How long does it take? Valve replacement? 3 to 5 hours usually. Sometimes longer. Another pause. And you do that alone? I have a team, I said. But yes, I lead the procedure. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that's something coming from him. That something is a cathedral. That something is a hand on the shoulder. A can you believe this kid? A toast in a room full of people. I told him it was. I told him it was something. We talked for 22 minutes, which is longer than we have talked on the phone in maybe 15 years. He asked about my patients, not by name of course, but about the work, the cases, the decisions. He asked what it felt like when a surgery went wrong, and I told him the truth, which I'd never told anyone in my family before. He didn't fill the silence after that with something else, he sat in it. At the end, before we hung up, he said, I'll ask more, I should have been asking. I said, okay, Dad, and I meant it. Not as a closing of the book, not as a resolution that ties everything neat, because some things don't resolve, they just evolve, slowly, at the pace of two people learning to speak a language they both neglected for too long. But as a beginning, a door left open, that was enough for now, and for the first time in a long time, enough felt like enough.